Bob Sansevier here with Pioneer Press Deputy Sports Editor John Plume. John, I didn't think the Vikings would be 0-2. I didn't think they would collapse in the second half of their first two games. Is this it is a big deal what they've done, but do you see things that could easily turn around against Detroit and they get this thing going in the right direction, or you think this is going to be a signal that after 2 weeks, this is what fans are going to be seeing, the Vikings are going to be seeing is a lot of trouble?
I think it's a signal of where they are from a talent perspective. They're not good enough right now to play perfect for 4 quarters. They just don't have the talent they had 2 years ago when they had Favre at quarterback. I mean, this was an aging team. They got rid of some guys before the season started going into camp. They cut McKinney. I mean, they're in trouble on the offensive line. They've got issues in the back end of the defense.
But they're not in trouble on the line, to make that clear, because they cut McKinney.
It's just they have some issues there. You don't really know what you have with Herrera, with Sullivan. I'm not so sure that, I mean, Steve Hutchinson's certainly not the player that he was 2 or 3 years ago when they signed him to that, what at the time was the biggest contract for an offensive guard in football. And Charlie Johnson certainly has had trouble the entire training camp. He hasn't been able to block Jared Allen. But for them to win games, they have to play perfect for 4 quarters, and they can't do it right now.
Well, the thing, if you're not following this team closely, and a lot of people around the country just look at it, what they look at is real good first halves, second half, they get beaten. That would suggest, if you're looking from afar, that other teams are making adjustments and the coaching staff is not anticipating the adjustments. Leslie Frazier, I thought he showed last year in his interim stint he knows how to coach football. Do you think that these teams have made adjustments and the coaches have not been able to adjust? I mean, I think Leslie's still going to be a heck of a coach, but is that part of what's happening here?
No, I don't buy that. I think what's happened in the second half of these games is defensively they haven't played very, very disciplined. I mean, the one thing that you noticed in these first 2 games is you've got guys out of their gaps, guys in the wrong lanes. When they play this cover 2, they're giving up stuff in front of them, and kind of like what Jared Allen said, after Sunday's game, they drop into the cover 2, they leave these lanes open underneath, and the recipe right now is you can beat this defense on crossing routes, and that's what they're doing. That's how they got the 51-yard play, after Robeson was offsides, and basically it comes down to discipline. This team is not very disciplined. They're making a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of missed tackles. They get those 2 things fixed, the missed tackles and the penalties, and they should be fine, but they're not a playoff team.
Well, what kind of an impact can Kevin Williams have a big enough impact to make a difference? And whatever he does, there's still going to be guys in the secondary that have to make a stop, and that's not happening. They're going against a team now that has a quarterback who's pretty hot to start the season and one of the best receivers in football in Calvin Johnson.
I mean, the Lions are going to give them everything, they probably don't want at this point. The nice thing about Kevin Williams is he gives you a push up the middle. The guy's always been able to rush the passer. I think he's got like 51 career sacks with like 11 and a half one season. So, I mean, they need him back. They've been able to stop the run in the first couple of games. They're only giving up 90 yards a game rushing. It's all the mistakes in the back end. I think you're seeing that Cedric Griffin's not totally healthy. He got beat by Vincent Jackson in the first game. He was wide open and Rivers missed him. And then this last week he gave up the touchdown in the left corner of the end zone. So you kind of got to wonder about him. But from a safety standpoint, they're just not very good. And Antoine's good in the slot, but when they have to go to that nickel package, they're in trouble a little bit. And if they can't rush the passer with 4 guys, they're going to get beat.
Well, if they could find a team that has just one receiver, then they're fine because Antoine could cover him. But other than that, they are in trouble. And, the thing you got to like about Kevin Williams, here's a guy that people talk about all the time. He'll play the game for free.
Yeah, he will. The next 2 games he plays for free. And
that's part of the suspension.
It's interesting with the Lions is you've got Calvin Johnson and Burleson. You got Luke Pettigrew as a tight end. And Stafford has just been, ever since the preseason, the guy's been on fire. And Javid Best rushed for 100 yards this last game. I expect Detroit to win the football game, probably by a touchdown. And then the Vikings go to Kansas City, where they haven't won since Bud Grant was the coach. So these next 2 games are going to be tough. They could be staring 0-4 in the face right now.
The key question, who wins more games this year, the Gophers or the Vikings?
I don't know.
You said 3 to 4 games for the Gophers. Where do you see? Have you dialed it back a bit on the? You weren't overly optimistic before the season.
I don't think right now they're more than a 4 or 5 win football team. They're not very disciplined, which is very uncharacteristic with a Leslie Frazier coach team. And maybe they'll come along. The curious thing is going to be, at what point do they put McNabb on the bench and put Ponder in the lineup? I don't think you'll see that happen probably until the bye week, and that's only if they just, if they're 3-5 or 2-6 and have no shot at the playoffs, then I think you'll see that happen. But, they're definitely a team that they need to find it somehow this week, because if they don't, 0-3, I think it's 5% of the teams that have started 0-3 in NFL history have made the playoffs. So.
The thing, this is not, there's no, it's not like there's no resume on Leslie Frazier. He did a very impressive job last year as the interim head coach, and I still think that he can get things going. Now, as you say, the postseason may not be part of it this year, but I mean, that's one thing they have in their favor. They got a guy on a staff that I think knows how to coach.
Yeah, it's not just Les either. You've got, Mike Singletary, who's coaching the linebackers, and Joe Woods. Say what you want about the secondary, but he's actually done a pretty decent job with them. I mean, what
they have to work with is their problem.
Yeah, I mean, looking ahead to next year's draft, they need to address the safety position. They're going to need to address linebacker. They're going to need to address defensive tackle. They're going to need to address offensive line. I mean, you've got 4 major needs right there.
And it doesn't all have to be done in the draft.
And you're not going to be able to do it, but you're also going to be a team strapped by the salary cap. I mean, it's going to be painful the next couple seasons for this team, because the all-in mentality they had in 2009 with Favre and the 12 men in the huddle that cost them going to the Super Bowl. I mean, if you get to the Super Bowl, you can forgive what's happening now, but Leslie's basically been handed a team sinking fast, and now it's up to him to turn it around, and it's probably going to take him 2 or 3 seasons. The big question is, how much patience are the Wilfs going to have during that time?
Well, isn't it somewhat ironic that they once had 12 men in the huddle, now they can't find 11 guys to put on the field who can do the job? And on that note, I'm sure they will have something to say about the Vikings, just like the Gophers, in the days, weeks, months, millenniums ahead.